Welcome everyone to the first of two short videos on ethics in the workplace. The one that I'll start with is called Ethical Decision Making in the Modern Workplace, and then that will be followed up later on with Restoring Ethical Climate in the Workplace. So where to start? In a lot of ways, these two short videos provide you with a little bit of a conclusion for where we went in the course thus far. It's important to note that what we've been trying to accomplish all term has a lot to do with the blending of two very important things, theory and practice. And we've been talking about how we are working towards or developing, cultivating skills and habits of an ethical practitioner. And an ethical practitioner is someone who is in the workplace, who has that consciousness and awareness and has that leadership about them, and is not afraid to try to solve problems that are ethical dilemmas in the workplace. So theory and practice is not meant to say, or you shouldn't take it to mean, that we're talking about theories that don't connect with our actual decisions or our practice in the workplace. The ideal is that we can combine both the theory that we've learned about and the practice that we're heading towards. And we say we've done that in this course in a variety of ways. So, under the title of Ethical Decision Making in the Modern Workplace, it's important for us to just think about a couple of things that we can synthesize as a result of looking at all of these theoretical approaches that we did at the beginning of the term. For the first 4 chapters of the course, we were looking at different theories, different ideas, or to say it another way, different ways of solving, strategies for solving problems. And no one theory can be the go-to for every ethical dilemma that we face. The important piece here is that as practitioners in the workplace, we have a lot of different ways of thinking that we can use or utilize to get to the best possible solution when it comes to the problems that we face in the workplace. So, building on that, what theoretical approaches, as an example, have we talked about? We've talked about utilitarianism. We've talked about deontology. What's the bottom line of these two theories? Well, the takeaways of something like utilitarianism are numbered. There's a lot of different things that we can point to and learn from. One of the things that I usually stress is that need to look and pay attention to the consequences of our actions, both in the short term and the long term. What's going to happen when we make this decision? And a lot of us are consequentialist in our approach. So we say that lines up with utilitarian thought. So that's a way of synthesizing, a way of thinking that we can apply towards solving ethical problems. And ultimately, later on, I'm going to touch on the solving of the ethical problems and what kinds of problems and that sort of thing. So we have utilitarianism, we have deontology. What's deontology about? It's that duty, that it's the motive that we have, the duty that we have towards others, and the motive that we have within us to act in accordance with morality and to know what the good decision is in that particular moment when we face that problem. So we've also talked about rights and duties in this course. And if I can direct all of these to, the ideal leader in the workplace, well, the ideal leader in the workplace uses a little bit of all of these ways of thinking. So utilitarianism, deontology, theories or ways of thinking about fairness and equality, ways of thinking about rights and duties, ways of thinking about how am I going to serve all of my employees? If I'm a leader, how am I going to bring people together through the relationships that I'm able to cultivate? What does it mean to practice virtue in the workplace? How do we reward people who are courageous and unafraid to tell us their stories so we can learn and build better principles within our workplace. How do we reward compassion when we think about how compassionate employees can be, and maybe sometimes how less compassionate or how the lack of compassion that some employees might have? What can we do about that in the workplace? How does it apply to a principle that we can create to benefit all of the people in an organization? So these are important pieces, but all of them involve theoretical connections with the philosophers that we've looked at in the first part of our course. We can go on and talk more about virtue approach, but I'll leave it there. The approach to handling problems with courage and compassion and honesty and integrity and these sorts of things are vital to the functioning of a place that you want to go to work every day, and the place that you can feel happy to go to work to every day. So what's involved then when we stretch this thinking, or when we use these strategies of theory and we direct them towards leaders in the workplace? What does a leader need to be able to do? And I just want to comment on that before we move on to how to restore an ethical climate, which is also an interesting sort of field of study that's taking off as of recent. So we'll circle back to that. When it comes to ethical decision making, the ethical decision making process, we might say, and how it applies to leaders in the workplace, we can say, what does a leader need to have or be able to show to be an ethical leader? And we might say the first thing is the ethical leader understands that they need to know the problem and take the necessary time to think through the problem before they respond to the problem. So some problems are not solved within a 15-minute board meeting or a 20-minute appointment with somebody. You have to stretch those out, and sometimes it takes several days, sometimes several months to really come to the best way to handle a problem in the workplace that has an ethical sort of overlap with it. And even the ones that don't sort of involve ethics necessarily could potentially lead to ethical problems. So we say that leader needs to understand what the problem is and takes the necessary time, as I say, to make a decision. The other things that the other quality I would say that a leader has in this regard is that a leader's not afraid to ask for help. A leader's not afraid to network with others. So the best leaders in the workplace today are the ones that seek the insight of all of the people in their workplace to the extent that they can do that within their particular role. Sometimes there's less opportunity to meet up with everybody, but a leader should make an effort to meet up with everybody and hear what they say or listen to their insights and advice, right? Not necessarily because the whole of it is going to be of value to the institution or to the organization, but that some of it might bring our thinking and our policies to a better place. And as ethical practitioners, this is something we think about a lot. Am I willing to ask for the help that I need to solve this problem? The next one, sort of quality I want to just touch on is, really embrace, as an ethical practitioner, it's necessary that we embrace a reflective habit about our character. That reflection is, or outlines, is the sort of the what brings everything together in our character. Our ability to think through problems and understand that problems don't solve themselves, and that we have to look in a lot of different places and consider a lot of different answers before we make a decision. That's an essential, vital characteristic of an ethical leader. And we would say, okay, so the best leaders then are reflective, and they have what I would suggest They have an understanding of what it means to pre-reflect and to post-reflect, and how, as we take these two things and put them together, it makes sense to say, before I make a decision, these are the things that I think about, and understand that I might make some mistakes and forget and not forget that I'm going to make mistakes in that pre-reflection that I could potentially regret. So it's necessary, again, take the time in the pre-reflective sort of phase. And then post-reflection, after I make a decision or after a decision becomes implemented in the workplace, what was the consequence of it? What was the result of it, and how can I learn from it? And that's important for, becoming, again, the ethical practitioner, or the characteristic of the ideal ethical leader in the workplace, as I would say. That leader needs to have that problem-solving ability, but in addition to that, the reflection and the necessary time it takes to get to the answer and to be able to consult. And that'll be my next sort of piece here, that consulting with others in the workplace actually benefits everybody in the workplace, because employees believe that they are having their interests heard. And even if an employee might feel later on that they are not being treated fairly, they know that they have an avenue to talk about what they're being wronged by, or what their situation is. So that's of benefit to everyone. And it goes along with this reflective approach as well. We could say relationship developing and interpersonal relationships are important for an ethical leader as well. We want to be able to understand that managers can put policies in that are going to help everyone, but they have to build those policies with the help of all the resources and the different parties in a workplace that can help, right? So try to get as many people as possible involved in a decision. Couple last points I want to make before we round out this first short video. Before we make a decision, and before we expect the decision or the course of action to turn out in our favor, as ethical practitioners in the workplace, it's always necessary to get into the habit of articulating and writing things down, right? If you're not aware already, that when you create a proposal, for example, you are trying to take a lot of ideas and synthesize those ideas so that you can make the best decision. And that skill of synthesis from reading someone else's text or what they've said, and compiling information and drawing it together in a way that people can make sense of, is an art that a leader has as well. So you create that proposal and you put in the parts that are going to be of benefit to everyone in the organization, if that's possible. Usually when it's an ethical decision, we say there's some connection with every single employee that works in an organization. And then lastly, I would just want to say, qualities that we want in the ethical leadership today. When something gets implemented and we've taken that time to think about and gather ideas and talk and build relationships in the workplace, and we have our proposal, and now we've made a decision, and we're at the last sort of now we wait scenario. Once we implement solutions that we have to problems, or the way that we're handling policies in the workplace, updating policies, once we expect to implement, we need to always evaluate. We need to both analyze and evaluate. Analyze what happened because of a decision, and understand the variables and why people may have not been in favor and that sort of thing. But also beyond that, but beyond that analysis, we should also be thinking about, did we do a good job? Evaluating Is this good enough, or do we need to make it better? Are we going with the philosophy of, well, let's just put it out there because it's good enough for now? Obviously, we want to avoid that or avert away from that in favor of pre-reflection, as we said before, and then later on, this is part of the post-reflection. Let's look at the solutions that we had for a problem, the way that we've dealt with it in the past, and learn from that before we make the same mistakes again, or before we make any, try to avoid all mistakes in the future. Even though that's highly unlikely in an organization, we can at least tally where we are and take a picture, a snapshot of where we are. There's a lot of times in the workplace where there is disagreement or where there is a lack of ethics, and maybe we say ethical practitioners. It's because a lot of the solutions, or the right solutions, weren't properly implemented. And so that brings us to that next step in the process. Well, what happens when an organization is not running in line with what we say are virtuous ethics and leader, all right, or virtuous ethics and leader behavior, we might say. So when we implement the solutions, we got to take away, and if the solutions are not working and we have, for example, a toxic workplace, then we can address it. And that's really, when I come back to the next short video, I'll talk mostly about how this restoring or cultivating virtue in the workplace is so important to the organization, and that it often is going to rely on ethical practitioners like us who can move into the workplace and start to help with these sorts of matters. So I'll see you in the follow-up video.